charged up, you know, and you feel like you can do something about all this silliness that's happening.
Mhm.
That's the truth.
It's empowering.
Mhm. All right, well, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to Big Tent and welcome to bigtentusa.org. I hope all of you will take the chance to look at the website and explore this wonderful website that we have. It has a list of lots of activities, of things that you can go to that are the most interesting stuff that's out there to educate you on our political process and what we can do to interact with it. So I strongly encourage everyone to go to bigtentusa.org and check out the events tab and see what's happening. It has all of our events, which are slowed down for the summer, so we don't have anything to announce today. But it also lists wonderful events throughout the internet that you can go to and learn about what's happening and how you can do things. Now, what I can tell you is that Big Tent is a group that was formed of suburban women, but we've expanded much beyond that. We're now all over the United States, and we have men and women, and we're committed to our goals of truth, transparency, and decency in American politics. So we try to find that middle ground where we can talk to each other and respect each other, but also to move forward with things which we believe are important. And therefore, we have lots of education where we teach each other about every subject. This last year, we've covered all the relevant political subjects. And we're also very committed to activism. And this group, this Tuesday group, which you are here visiting, this is I think, the strongest activism wing of Big Tent, where we write letters and we encourage each other and we offer each other companionship through this process. So on that note, talking about our activism and our letter writing, I'm going to turn this over to Vanessa and let Vanessa tell us about the next letter writing campaign that's coming up. So Vanessa, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Just wanted to give a quick recap of our West Virginia letter writing campaign. We have I believe we have all three of our wonderful letter writing co-chairs here. Karen Mara, Donna Moffley, and Ann Dubois should be here too, I think. So just a big thank you to them for all their efforts and steering us into all these wonderful campaigns that are really important. West Virginia, we sent out 1,000 letters to West Virginians asking them to call Joe Manchin's office and asking him to pass S1, the For the People Act, which we know today is a big day for the test vote. So fingers crossed. But thank you to all of you for all your efforts in requesting letters and getting them sent out. I have heard from the West Virginia local organizations that we've been working with, and they said it's working, that he's getting a lot of phone calls, and that was the goal. So thank you to all of you who helped with that. Our next letter writing campaign, we are going to be working with Vote Forward again. And on Thursday, the 24th, they are going to be announcing a campaign in Virginia for all summer long. So please stay tuned for communications from Donna and Ann and Karen and myself, and with instructions, and we will just get right back at it. So more details to come. And thank you all so much again for coming today. And now I'll turn it over to Ann Taylor, who will be introducing our guests, our speakers today from down home, North Carolina. Ann, take it away.
Right. Thank you, Vanessa. I just want to say hello from North Carolina. I am welcoming everybody from Connecticut and all around the country. This is great. We have one of our most impactful groups in North Carolina, and I am welcoming them. It's called Down Home North Carolina. Formed in 2017, Down Home is building multiracial power for rural working folks from small towns in North Carolina. To put this in context of importance, in North Carolina, 80 out of our 100 counties are considered rural. And by all counts, there's about 665,000 unregistered voters in North Carolina. 42.7% are rural potential voters. Down Home's vision directly from their website definitely says it best for me. We unite to build the power and raise the voices of working people in small town in rural North Carolina in order to take action on the issues that matter to us. By weaving together our different experiences, we can shape a democracy that serves working people, where our labor is valued, our food, our water, and our land are healthy. Today, I have the honor to introduce Down Home's co-directors, Dreama Caldwell, co-director, a Down Home member, and a fairly new co-director. Dreama was born and raised in Alamance County. She spent 25 years in education until changing to work in hospitality. Since that time, she's become deeply involved with Down Home, North Carolina. And in 2020, she ran for county commissioner. Dreama garnered significant support among Black voters, young voters, and first-time voters. Todd Zimmer, co-founder and co-director. Todd has served as the national political organizer for climate justice group 350 Action. Additionally, he has served as the national campaign coordinator for Showing Up for Racial Justice and as a campaign and organizer for Rainforest Action Network. A lifelong native of North Carolina, Todd has been active as a core organizer in regional racial justice struggles, and he lives in Greensboro, North Carolina. And lastly, I'll mention Bridget, who unfortunately had a conflict today, but she's co-founder and co-director with Todd. And she most recently was the organizing director of Align, where she led winning policy campaigns at the city level that strengthened standards for 4,000 commercial sanitation workers in New York City, as well as improving public health for 3 overburdened low-income and people of color districts. She drove labor and community coalition mobilizations for Fight for 15 and various Wall Street actions. Bridget and Todd co-founded Down Home, North Carolina in early 2017 in response to the election results of November 2016. We welcome you all and look forward to hearing about Down Home, North Carolina. And Dreama, welcome, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks. I just want to tell you a little bit addition to what you told about how I ended into Down Home. So it was actually an actual issue that I was experiencing through the criminal justice system that led me into Down Home as a member. And so one of the things that I want to say is that many of our members come into our membership because of local issues that are impacting them, and they're looking for a place to talk about those issues. And so me particularly, you spoke about me running for office, but something magical happened even though that did not result in me winning. And so I'll talk about that at a later time as well. And so we're going to present a presentation, Todd and I, about Down Home.
Are y'all seeing the toolbar and all that? Unfortunately, it seems like maybe so, huh?
Yeah, just on the left.
Okay.
You can go to present mode at the bottom.
Let me see here.
Yep,
Yeah.
that one right there. Yeah.
Okay. It's actually here. Let me do something here. Y'all have 2 screens set up, so I think that's what's making it confused. Let me switch that, and then we'll be ready to go. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, y'all. Happy. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. It's really nice. Dreama and I, as was mentioned earlier, we've known each other for a really long time, but Dreama is relatively new as a co-director at Down Home, and so we haven't done a ton of presentations together just yet. So thanks for being a friendly audience for us to practice, and we're really excited to share, what Down Home does. And we're still a very young organization. We've done a lot in a few years, and we're going to try to just bring you up to speed on what that journey's been like, what we're doing, where we're trying to go. We probably won't be able to go deep into everything. So if there's something that interests you and you end up with a question, you want to throw it in the chat, we'll have some space at the end to dig into that. And without further ado, I'm gonna take y'all through our organization. and Dream and I will be tag teaming this. So, yes, was asked to share sort of like what happened that found it down home. And I guess I want to ask everybody to try to go back in your mind to the evening of Election Day 2016, you know, the presidential race between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I don't know where you were at that morning when you woke up as far as what you expected to happen that day, but I will tell you that personally, I was like terrified. I had been convinced based on what I could see on the ground in North Carolina, and I'll talk about this in a second, having attended a whole bunch of Trump rallies, not as a Trump supporter, but having attended nonetheless. I was very, very nervous that he was going to win that night. And I had done everything I could that year, and so had Bridget, up until literally the last minute, right? Like knocking doors until the polls closed, right? Like trying every single thing we could to try to prevent Donald Trump from taking power, because we knew that him and his movement represented a turn towards racism, away from democracy, and that it would not benefit our communities, but would actually really do deep damage. So that evening, like we couldn't knock on any more doors. The polls were closed. We had to sit down and just wait for the results. And so Bridget Flaherty, my co-founder, is someone I had known for about 10 years in organizing. She was up in Brooklyn. We'd been talking for weeks just about like, what's going to happen? What are we doing? You know, what should we do? And we started chatting early in the night, like, hey, we'll see what happens. This could go really, really bad, or maybe we've been, concerned for reasons that won't pan out, you know? And I think we all know what happened that night, right? Like we saw Florida fall and we were like, oh no, like the thing is happening. I was actually at a neighbor's house and I was like, I have to leave. I can't be around other people right now. And I ended up like, y'all holed up in the corner of a bar, like freaking out, right? And texting Bridget until 3 a.m. at night, just saying like, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our movement? What do we need to learn right now? And like, how do we take this seriously? And I was already down in North Carolina, but Bridget was in Brooklyn, and we just kept hyping each other up. Like we've got to dig in. We've got to really build a response. And it ended up with Bridget committing like that night at 3 a.m. over text, like, all right, I'm going to move down there. We're going to found an organization. And we were like, let's take this conversation onto the Signal thread. So it genuinely started that organization. You know, we committed to founding Down Home that night. And we committed to founding it because we wanted to answer the deep questions about like what makes fascist and racist tendencies a path to power in the United States, and what has happened that has meant that the progressive movement isn't effectively preventing that. So that's kind of like what Down Home was designed to answer. As for me, like what got me to that place, I mentioned a moment ago, I attended a bunch of Trump rallies that year. This is me getting dragged out of a planned disruption that we did at a Trump rally in Fayetteville earlier in that election cycle. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a Republican household. I got politicized around the invasion of Iraq and in the treatment of gay people in my community. Found organizing, spent about 10 years in the climate movement, and was living in California when the Charleston massacre happened, which to me said, Todd, you need to go home and you need to work on Southern issues, because that is your responsibility. So I came home just in time to catch Donald Trump announce his campaign, and ended up spending that whole year, like I said earlier, trying to figure out how to prevent him from winning, but nothing worked, right? Like we created a network to plan serial disruptions across the country. It wasn't enough. We needed a long-term intervention to really address the underlying drivers of Trumpism, which is like, in North Carolina, my context, that has a lot to do with the fact that progressives haven't been trying to win in small towns and rural places. And we've been allowing the other side to be the only voice in the room to blame everything bad that happens on Black and brown folks and never offer real solutions to poor and working people in small town and rural North Carolina. Continually tell them that deporting immigrants, locking up Black and brown folks, and corporate tax cuts are somehow going to improve their lives. We know that's not true. So that's me. That's how I got to that night. I live in Greensboro. I have a 16-month-old daughter, 18-month-old daughter. And yeah, just bringing myself in, and I want to let Dreama say how she came to the organization. So.
Yeah, in 2015, so I do not come from an organizing background. I come from just a working class background. I have been executive directors in fields like childcare, hospitality, restaurants. And so in 2015, when I was the executive director of a childcare center, one of the employees committed a supervision error that resulted in a child being left behind on a bus for a significant part of time. That situation resulted in criminal charges being brought against the employee, against myself as the administrator of the program, and the owner of the program. And so going through that whole process itself was hard, but then when I found out a warrant was given for my arrest, I went to turn myself in, and with the expectation that my bond may be maybe $4,000, and I got to the jail and my bond was $40,000. And that was the beginning that I realized that something was different, because my co-defendants, who just a few miles down the road were arrested in another county, they were allowed to sign themselves out of jail. So initially I was kind of behind the 8 ball there. I did not have a full understanding of cash bail, didn't know it was a problem that multiple people were experiencing. I really thought it was just myself. And so my sister had to actually take money out of her 401k to pay a bondsman, which was money that we never saw again, to get out of, to be free from jail. And so coming out from that, I began just looking because I just had this feeling that something wasn't right. There's something else going on. And so I began to look for people or organizations, and a Facebook ad popped up from down home who was new to the area in 2017. I'd come through probation, gotten through all of that stuff, and just had a really icky feeling. And so when I saw that Facebook ad, I responded to it. And when I responded to it, I was reached out to by organizers and by Todd. And so I was able to have multiple one-on-ones and talk to them about the issue of that I was having with cash bail. So I like to tell people I'm here today because of Facebook ads. I'm here because of the power of one-to-ones. And so that is something that I kind of hold close. Like, this is really relational work. I've always been a voter, so it wasn't any question of whether I was going to vote. But what I have not been an educated voter. I didn't understand how these positions were really impacting my daily life and what it meant to myself and my community. And so thankful for being in the down home space that I was able to become an educated voter. Our Stop Criminalizing the Poor working group was kind of formed around that same time. And so we began to have conversations and an opportunity to share my story of what had happened to me. Most of the people that were currently in that group were not impacted. And so it was the first time that they wanted to address these issues, but it was the first time that impacted people were at the table. And so out of that, the Alamance County Bail Fund, which is the first bail fund in rural bail fund in the country, was birthed.
Thanks, Dreama.
Yes.
So there's a lot of text on this slide. Don't freak out, I'll cover it. But just sort of like, how did we get from that night, election eve night, on the text with Bridget, to the moment where we got to meet Dreama and we were in communities organizing? I want to tell a little bit about that story and how we got started. So like I had said earlier, I was already in North Carolina. I had moved back a few years previously. And so I was able to start organizing right away and testing out Bridget and I's ideas. But before that happened, like, there were a bunch of trips back and forth from me going up to Brooklyn and meeting with Bridget in her basement to like draw out and plan out the organization. We actually had one of our first ever fundraisers in New York, in Brooklyn, for like the North Carolina diaspora. Like all the Carolinians who now live up in New York helped raise some of the very first money that we used to go back down to North Carolina and get started on doors. And for Bridget, y'all, she had to actually pick up and move. She left her partner at the time and moved from, from Fort Greene to rural Western North Carolina mountains. So quite a big cultural transition for her. But really how we got started, y'all, and this is Down Home's culture, this is how we roll. We started our work on the doors. We did not want to come into communities feeling like we knew what needed to happen. We know that that's a mistake that's been made over and over again. And because we're an organization that believes in member leadership, that believes in working class people being experts in their own lives and, making their own decisions about what candidates we endorse, who we work, what campaigns we work on, et cetera. We started out by going on doors and asking people, what are you struggling with in your life? What would help solve the problem for you? And who do you feel like is responsible for making those changes? And we went out and we had thousands of conversations on low-income doors and on porches, in the parking lot of Walmart, at the Department of Social Services. And we collected this huge body of data basically telling us what people were concerned about. We published all that in a report called No One's Ever Asked Me Before, because that is what we heard over and over and over and over again from people who said, you want to know what I think? Like, my voice doesn't matter, which is kind of the whole problem, because of course these people's voices matter. And that was one of the first things that we wanted to say to them, right? Is no, your voice does matter. And how we got into relationship with people is we'd have a conversation in the parking lot, say, and we'd call them the next day and we'd say, that was a really interesting conversation that we had. I'm wondering if you'd be open to meeting with me again so we could talk about it some more. And we gradually got into relationship with people in the communities, Black, white, and brown, in small town and rural North Carolina. And we're able to bring them into our organization and start the process of really organizing and choosing issue campaigns to fight on, like the one that Dreama, joined a few months later, and also beginning our political work. So some of our values that we welcome people in with are that all are welcome in Down Home, North Carolina. But we also know that people are going to come in having, with behaviors and experiences that that are leading us to distrust and harm one another, working across the racial barrier, working across the gender divide. We're going to have to put in work to unlearn those behaviors, and we're going to have to build trust with one another by speaking openly and honestly and respectfully about our experiences. We also said that we're going to have to bring others into Down Home. The other side has a lot of money. We only really have people. So we have to be an organization that recruits and builds a membership that can help direct our work. And our ethic was that, it's going to have to be us. No one is coming to save the day for poor and working people in small town and rural North Carolina. If we want to see changes happen, they're going to have to come from us in our community. And that means that every single person who comes into our space is a leader. And if you're coming into our space, you're coming in to get to work with us. And our vision was that we are neighbors, we're rooted in the community. We come together to grow our state into a place that works for us, not just the rich and powerful. We want to grow our democracy. We want to improve the quality of life so that our grandbabies can inherit a state that's healthy and just. And that was how we first got started. See, a great question, Kitty. I want to hold that around local people leading these conversations. It is very important to us, and we can say more about why, but I want to bring Dreama back in to just sort of talk about how we move that vision forward and what we actually do.
So at Down Home, it's been stated several times today that we build power for poor and working class people. How we achieve that is through our core areas of work, which is through year-round leadership development. We know that happens through building we have a member-led organization that powerfully transformed the lives of our members. For our member transformations, we want to transform how members see their power and their ability to influence the world around them, and gain new skills through for leading, communicating, and even organizing. And when I think of this, I think of Miss Debbie, who is with the Alamance chapter, who has used her voice and her story in advocacy for Medicaid expansion, which is something that I think we fought since the beginning of 2017, but also Miss Debbie uses her voice to advocate for people with a substance use disorder, as well as ableism. And political power and elections are a big part of what we need to do. Growing power for poor, multiracial, and rural people is our goal, and to win those issues and govern directly. We win long-term campaigns to win structural reforms that removes corporations' ability to influence and shape the conditions of our government. And we do that particularly by growing local and statewide governing power by running members for office, and which is an example of why I ran for office. I stated earlier that campaign, we did not win that campaign, but in so many ways we won. We increased the Black voter turnout in Alamance County alone by 42%, which beat the state of North Carolina. And so we saw the importance of that. And I have the pleasure this year of seeing my childhood friends are now running for office in Alamance County. And so it's this power that people are beginning to see that they can have a part of as well. And so we do that through election work. We also do strategic campaign work, and we look for a way to create corporate accountability campaigns to change the narratives about issues and building racial solidarity. And so our aim is to create an intersectional campaigns and articulate those connections based on, identity-based movements. We want to build a world that promotes a larger social and racial justice issue, but also these strategic campaigns, because we have statewide chapters, they're very particular to what's going on for members and local issues. So it's not the same issues across the board, it's very localized issues.
Thanks, Dreama. And
Thanks.
As you were talking, Dreama, I just wanted to explain this image because I actually think it touches on all three of these things. This is an image from 2018, and the gentleman you see pushing the stroller in our blue t-shirt, his name is Keith Sellers. He voted in the, I believe, the 2016 general elections, and he believed he was eligible to vote. He was someone who had completed his he had been in and out of the criminal justice system, thought he had completed his debt to society and was eligible to vote. In fact, his parole officer had told him that he was. He was subsequently charged with felony voter fraud because North Carolina law, because he hadn't completed his probation, made it illegal for him to vote. So he didn't intend to violate the law. He wanted to exercise his democratic rights, but he ended up running afoul. In every county in the state, charges were dismissed, but in Alamance County, where he lived, he and 11 other defendants were charged with felony voter fraud. And we knew that was an attempt to basically make anyone with criminal justice contact afraid to vote, right? It was a voter suppression tactic that happens way too often in North Carolina. So we campaigned on the strategic campaign tip to have Keith and his fellow defendants have their charges dropped. We trained Keith and other community individuals to be leaders on this issue and to know how to organize. And what Keith is doing in this picture is leading a march to the polls to show that he would not be intimidated and he would actually go vote again because voting is that important to our community. So kind of a good blending of the political power in elections, leadership development, and strategic campaigns. And great moment. So we just kind of want to take y'all through some of what we've done since we got started. Again, we do a lot mainly around those three things. In our very first, full calendar year of work, we were able to participate in a successful effort to stop a rate hike by our monopoly utility here. Duke Energy tried to raise rates by about $20 a month, which for poor and working people can mean the difference between being able to keep a roof over your head, being able to get critical medication, And our members, one of the first times we mobilized poor and working people to the Utilities Commission to speak on their own behalf about what that impact would mean in their lives. And we were able to prevent that rate increase, which helped, untold, tens of thousands of poor and working people across the state. We won a living wage for small town Waynesville city workers. We fought against a 287G proposal that would have brought ICE into our communities in partnership with a local racist sheriff in Alamance County. Just mentioned the fight around the Alamance 12 and that felony voter fraud issue. We were able to get national attention around that. We opened a syringe exchange in Western North Carolina, where the overdose crisis is really acute, and people who are in active substance use disorder have been criminalized, meaning that they can't actually oftentimes get a safe way to, if they are injecting drugs, they can't get medical care if they have a problem, because they're afraid that they'll end up in jail for doing that. So we, as a way to save people's lives and to end stigmatization and talk about the medical needs of that community, we started distributing clean syringes to people who are in active use to help save lives. We launched 3 county-based chapters that year, and collectively we knocked more than 30,000 doors across the state that year. 23,000 of those were connected to our electoral work that year. We also placed 18,000 calls, mailed 13,000 mailers out, and had 100 canvassers knocking consistently throughout the year. I think this is me too, right, Dreama, into 2019. 2019, second full calendar year, we added Narcan overdose reversal kits to our kind of like mutual aid work and the syringe exchange work. We were able to track that we reversed 130 overdoses in our community that year. So again, like saving lives, being able to build a base of impacted people who can speak directly to that issue as we continue to lobby for like a public health response to the overdose crisis instead of criminalization. We introduced a new tactic that I want to touch on a little bit more, deep canvassing in the race class narrative. So a very advanced canvassing technique. We really fought hard this year for expanding Medicaid in North Carolina. Our Democratic governor actually vetoed the Republican budget because it didn't include Medicaid expansion. And so he invited down-home members to stand with him in that moment where he vetoed the budget, and we fought really hard all summer long to win Medicaid expansion. Sadly, it's still not been done, meaning that 600,000 Carolinians are not receiving the care that they would receive if we did that common sense thing. So as you can see, there's a lot of work connected to Medicaid this year. Across the state, we participated in municipal elections and knocked almost 9,000 doors, placed 4,000 calls, and about 1,000 texts. Dreama, you want to talk about 2022?
Yep.
2020 rather?
So down home 2022, 2020 was just a unusual year for all of us. But the work still continued. And so during COVID, we saw a need to create mutual aid to help support our community, our members, and our neighbors. And so we did that, and we were able to assist over 600 families with that fund. In 2020 elections, we sent 207,022 pieces of mail, 784 relational voter turnout leaders, contacting over 7,743 members, logging over 11,000 conversations. We did have 666,813 people reach through our digital ads. And as I stated before, those ads are important because I'm here because of those ads. We had 3,586,134 impressions and 5.38 impressions per person, which is like how many contacts and things that we were able to reach people, with over 120,000 texts and 28,800 deep canvas conversations. So deep canvas conversations in the pandemic may have had to take place like over a phone, or it wasn't as close to close contact, doorstep contact as we had wanted before. And 621,000 phone calls were placed. And we are so excited. This is a friend of mine, Ricky Hurtado, was elected to the House, who is the first Latinx that was elected to the House in North Carolina.
And it's worth pointing out, he was elected from the same county where we had been fighting ICE, historically red, extremely racist county that we built over years, movement that had the ability to elect him and break that color barrier. So that was extremely exciting for our membership to be able to do that as part of a multiracial movement.
And to show you kind of too how important it is, the work that we're doing, Ricky's election was won by a very narrow margin, which was like less than 400 votes. So those conversations that we had, those texts that we sent, all of our partners that we partner for, we were able to get Ricky elected. I see some questions that I'll go back and address.
Yeah, we're gonna hold them for the end, Dreama, but I know these are a lot of numbers. Numbers aren't necessarily inspiring. So just for context again, these are numbers that are based on, at this point, multiple years of year-round community engagement, year-round leadership development, meaning that local community members are the ones placing these calls, choosing who we endorse, choosing what issues we talk about. And so the difference between what was there before Down Home was founded, where there was no progressive organization, right, doing this kind of work in these places, there was no counter narrative to the far right and the racists in the county. Now you have this level of community contact, right, happening every single year, and we don't leave when the election's over, we stay, right? And we talk to people again, and we talk to people again. And I actually wanted to just do a quick gloss on deep canvassing because it's one of the pieces of work I'm most proud of. This is basically an alternative to the more transactional conversations that you often see on doors in an election campaign. These are conversations that are like 15 minutes long. And the reason they're so long is that they actually involve building a relationship and being vulnerable and sharing personal stories with the person you're talking to on the door and inviting them to do the same thing. And it's a very like developed and sophisticated relational technique that we really believe in. And we don't believe in it just because we feel that it works. We actually wanted to test it. We know that we're in a place where we're talking to people who have only heard from the right for a really long time. And we needed to learn, how can we inoculate, especially white voters, right, who might agree with us on things like Medicaid expansion or on economic issues, but consistently vote for the other side because of racial animus. So we designed an experiment to find out if we could inoculate those voters through deep canvassing against the racialized messages of the right and keep them in our coalition. We knocked 1,000 rural doors as part of this major effort. It was the first time this had been tested in the South. And we did it as part of a controlled experiment. So we got real academic level data. We worked with academics from Stanford and Yale to design this experiment. And we found that major swings in basically in the perspective of the people we canvassed. So an 8.5% swing in favor of including undocumented immigrants in Medicaid expansion, say. 6.5% increase in support for SNAP programs. 5.4% decrease in the number of people who would agree with the statement that immigrants are a net drain on our society. So we've done multiple repeat tests of this. We've done it in electoral contexts. In the 2020 elections, we tested race class narratives and deep canvassing over phones, specifically related to the presidential election. And we've used it very recently on a campaign to stop a jail expansion in an extremely red district in Western North Carolina mountains, where we get finding that 89% of people that we talk to actually agree with us after a conversation that this jail should not be built, even though it's like a 98% white, significantly red county. So it's just a tactic that we really believe in and are proud of. So what are we doing this year? 2021, the pandemic's easing. What's happening for us? describe a few things. I just mentioned the No New Jail campaign out in Western North Carolina. As of right now, y'all, we've stopped that jail program. They wanted to spend millions and millions of dollars from the county budget to build new jail cells. We have built through a deep canvas and citizen lobbying at the commission. We made sure that that project was not included in their 2020 fiscal year budget. That doesn't mean the project's dead, but it means that we have more time to build opposition to this and to really advocate for public health interventions, since such a high percentage of people who go into that jail have unmet medical needs. We're leaning into the ways in which the pandemic sort of while it took away our ability to meet in person for a year, it also actually forced us to raise our digital skills a lot. And so we are really trying in the run up to the 2022 elections, where there's a US Senate race in North Carolina, right? A consequential one. We want to take our organization to scale. We want to get well beyond the 5 chapters that we have now. And we're trying to add 12 to 16 brand new county-based chapters in time for them to help us anchor electoral work next year. So we're doing that through a program called 10,000 Rural Voices Heard. It's just like our old door knocking in the county, except it's happening online. So we're asking 10,000 rural residents of North Carolina to share with us what issues matter to them, what solutions they want, who do they hold responsible. We're working to get into a relationship with them. We're training them on one-on-ones. We're helping them build out networks in their home counties. And then we will be, helping them participate in our statewide electoral work in 2022. We're going to be participating in municipal elections this year because we know how important that is to build a bench of candidates and to keep our electoral muscles strong for 2022. We're really excited to welcome Dreama Caldwell on as a co-director. Big deal for our organization. Really loving working with you, Dreama, and that it's a great transition as Bridget transitions out next month. We will be electing our first ever board. We went independent at the beginning of this year after having been fiscally sponsored. So we're electing a member board from our chapters so that members really are leading and guiding our organization, so that we stay true to our mission and close to working class communities. And just another thing we're working on is we're refreshing our foundational political education and skills trainings, because we need to, right? It's been a few years, pandemics happened, we're no longer in the Trump era. And so we're really revisiting and redesigning the core educational curriculum that our members go through. So that's us for this year. And Dreama, tell them what's up next.
Yeah, for 2022, as Todd said earlier, it's a large election year, and we're just looking to expand our deep canvassing and to add, like he said, 200 members. We're hoping to our DNA training. We're looking to deepen our relationships with networks that we currently have, our partnerships, and also to create new partnerships. So we know that the path to 2022 is collaborative working with other boots that are on the ground. And so we are looking to strengthen that. Also in 2022, we are looking to deepen alliances and build and take collective action wherever it is possible for us. And we're looking to engage in a couple of races, the city council races and things for the municipal level. We know that if you touch a voter, if you can get a voter to vote 3 times, they'll continue to vote. And so here we're trying to keep people engaged into the municipal elections in hopes that we can also turn them out again for 2022.
Covered a lot of ground. I see a lot of awesome questions. And so thank you all for bearing with us through that presentation. It's fun to actually remember all the things that or some of the things that we've done. But I know it's a lot. So appreciate y'all for hanging in there for it.
Dreama and Todd, thank you so much. That was incredibly informative and inspiring. So we're really grateful to you. And Dreama, I'm so sorry you had that horrible experience. When you were telling your story, I got equally sad for you and your family, and equally mad for the system that you were having to deal with. It just seems grossly unfair, and it should be illegal. So thank you for taking your experience and turning it into real activism and becoming a leader in the fight that you're fighting in North Carolina. It's really inspiring. You certainly didn't duck under the covers after that, which I think some of us did feel like doing after the election of 2016. And so thanks to you, Todd, for you and Bridget for not going under the covers like I did after the election of Donald Trump. So a couple of questions for you, and I'm just going to blend a few, and it's really about relationship building. And it sounds like there are multiple ways that you're building relationships in North Carolina. So if we can go back to you talking about the cross-sectional relationship building that you are creating in the counties that you're working in between rural white North Carolinians and rural African-American North Carolinians, that would be great. And then if you can broaden out to talk about your relationship building with other organizations and the people you bring in to become the canvassers, the leaders, and potentially even, running for a municipal office, that would be great. I think we'd all love to hear more about that. It sounds like that's been the home run for you guys.
That's a great questions. Jimmy, do you want to speak to the first question around sort of like building relationships across race in our chapters?
Yeah, I think we know that we have been purposely taught many ways to distrust each other. And so that has been a big part of that work, and getting to the place where we can trust one another and understanding that becoming anti-racist is a lifetime process. It doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen after a racial equity training. And so people are still going to continue to make mistakes. And so we, within our chapters, we have the understanding that we have to give each other, there has to be accountability, but with grace. And so, having a conversation about like saying, hey, that offended me, and then being able to explain it and have a conversation, it's an opportunity for me as a person who was offended to share how I'm feeling, but it's also an unlearning opportunity for the person who is on the other end receiving. And so this is what we're having to do. We have this happen also not just with Black and white. We also have this with working class and poor. So class also falls into place. And so we have to have these conversations. We have to do that. We're currently in a process with Visions, with which our management just finished DEI training. And so we're extending some of the opportunities of the Vision program with our staffing and looking at ways to include in our staffing. So it's like this elephant in the room that is in the room that we sometimes don't talk about. We understand that if we're going to get to a place of trusting one another, we've got to be okay with uncomfortable conversations. And so creating a safe place where those things can happen, where it's not happening out of anger to one another.
Great answer, Dreama. I mean, I just to add a little bit, like our original theory was that people will come together on the basis of shared interests. So whether you're white or you're Black, right? Like having a living wage is in your interest. And we also are not a single issue organization. So lots of people come into the nucleus of our organization through whatever issue it is we're working on that touches their life. And then they connect with our organizational mission. They build relationships across race. They have the experience of struggling together for a common cause. And that can help build solidarity across race. That has worked at times in our organization. There have been really beautiful multiracial moments of cross-racial empowerment and like total transparency. It's hard to hold that space. And that's one of the reasons why we're like doubling down on our foundational political education, and we're going through this DEI process right now, is because really doing that successfully at scale, we're still working on figuring out how to really make sure that the spaces that we create are safe for everybody and empowering for everyone. And so it's an ongoing process. As far as like, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Before you jump, I just wanted to circle back to what you're both saying before we jump to the statewide relationship building. Can you just tell us a few a few of the issues that sort of resonate both cross racial lines and cross the socioeconomic lines, because obviously what you guys are experiencing in North Carolina is different from those of us in Connecticut or Rhode Island or California or, you know, whatever. I think we'd love to hear some of the issues that you're finding are so important to your to North Carolinian voters.
Yeah, I think what has been a common stop criminalizing the poor is something that affects all races. And so that has been an issue. We have a county in Alamance that is without a public defender's office. And so to see how that affects all of us, and talk about it in terms of how it affects all of us, we know that these systems affect our Black and brown neighbors a lot more, but they also affect all of us. I'll say, and they also affect all of us. And so that is one issue where we've been able to find some common ground that we've been able to work together in that issue. Todd, are there any other things that really stand out in your mind that?
I think that's a really good one, Dreama. Working class people are really consistently justice impacted, maybe to varying degrees based on race, but everyone's quite impacted or knows someone who is. I would say that Medicaid works in a similar way. Poor folks don't have access to healthcare regardless of their race. Living wages, similar problem. Housing. So some of these like universal basic needs, right? Like healthcare, housing, getting paid a fair amount for your job, and not being constantly stuck in like the revolving door of the criminal justice system. Those things are being experienced across the board by poor and working people. So those are some opportunities for us to build cross-racial solidarity.
And can I ask you one follow-up question as well? You both referred to it, whatever the news silo is, or the you know, that a lot of these voters, a lot of these North Carolinians had really only ever been impacted by, you know, fairly right-wing, you know, information silos. So can you just give us a little bit of a description of what that is like in North Carolina in rural counties?
Yeah, and I saw a question about broadband internet, so maybe I'll touch on that too right now. But just to say that like the media environment that an urban person has versus a suburban person versus a rural resident are dramatically different. Rural residents, a lot of times in North Carolina, do not have access to broadband internet. It's a real challenge for many of our communities, and we'd like to get it fixed. That's another issue that, by the way, cuts across the partisan line really effectively. Everybody wants broadband internet. The issues around utility bills are another good example that cross across the partisan line really effectively. But basically, you know, where people get their news in the very rural places, maybe Facebook to some extent. Generally Fox News, right? And I like to remember that when we're knocking on doors, a lot of the times the TV's on, and I think we should just assume it's been on for 16 years. Right? Like that's been the voice in the room for forever. The local media environment has really suffered. So like small town papers have been closing. I think we've lost definitely more than half. I want to say like 60 to 80% of small town papers in the last like decade here in North Carolina, which is insane. Meaning that there are just less voices in general. And so the media environment problem is a big one for us. Ways that we fix that, we have to go find people and knock on their door and talk to them. So that's why we invest in that so much. We do use Facebook a lot as a way to get in touch with people, and we have somewhat sophisticated way to like follow up with people after their first interaction with her. Like we'll run Facebook content that's designed to have mass appeal with only a tiny little shading of our values and politics, and then we sort of take people down a progressive pathway where we can identify like, oh, this person wants to continue a conversation with us about this. And we can take it a step further. And but we really believe in human interaction as being important, and relationships as being important in this media context. So
yeah, and I want to add to that another thing that our comms director, as well as our digital organizer, they presented a series called Homefront, which was about extremists. And it talked about this. It talked about the right-wing media, but it also helped people how to have conversations with your loved ones, with your neighbors that are maybe sucked into that media. And so that was a series that went on for a couple of weeks where people were able to come. And so our comms director has done a really good job of mapping out a lot of that extremist work. And so being able to share that and have conversations with people and to have question and answers and talks about that. It was called the Homefront series.
Homefront. Okay. Thank you for that. That's so interesting. I know we're running out of time, and so I want to be mindful of that. I know you guys have a lot of work to do. But can you just give us a sense for, what it looks like in North Carolina in terms of your work with other organizations? Someone asked, like, are you trying to replicate a fair fight in North Carolina? Sort of give us that sense. And I just want to remind people there is the link to Down Home North Carolina in the chat. So if you want to support the work of this amazing organization, please go ahead and click on that. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries, and I'm actually going to drop my email in case someone had a question that they didn't get answered. Like, very happy to connect over email, so it's in the chat. I'll touch real quick, Jim, and then you can get on this as well. There's a question in the chat about, like, are there urban alliances? That is part of why we founded Down Home, right? There was no way when we founded this organization for rural people to be a part of a statewide multiracial movement for justice. There was just no way for people to participate in Medicaid expansion programs or any other issue, right? And so 100% our intention is to bring our communities into authentic relationship with other organizations in the state, urban-led, working and poor people have really similar interests regardless of where they're living in the state. So we work in all kinds of partnership. We don't think that we can succeed on our own at all. So we participate with the Blueprint table, which is sort of like the C3 table in North Carolina. We also participate with the America Votes table, the C4 table. We have lots of relationship with different organizations in different ways. In the Medicaid campaign, we work closely with the NC Justice Center and others. But there are a few other organizations that really, I think, deeply share our politics around building a base and making sure that, we're expanding the ability of people to participate in politics who have been traditionally excluded. So just a couple of those groups that we love working with. Siembra NC does fantastic Latinx organizing. We love partnering with them. The Carolina Federation is another new organization that is similar to Down Home in building a base that works in some urban places that we don't work. We love to partner with them. North Carolina Association of Educators, which represents our teachers, are really close partners. The AFL-CIO in North Carolina, Advanced Carolina, which does organizing in the African American community in Eastern North Carolina, is a close partner of ours. Poder NC, another Latinx organization. These are groups who we really feel like we really share a vision of where we're trying to go together, right? And we were able to share resources and collaborate a lot. So North Carolina is blessed with a great spirit of collaboration and less competition than some other states. So we're really grateful for that. Dream, anyone else you'd lift up?
Yeah, I want to lift up one of our endorsed candidates that we had this past election cycle, named Amy Still, has created something called the New Voters Project, New North Carolina Project, which is very similar to, I saw in the chat, someone was asking about Stacey Abrams' playbook. It is the playbook for North Carolina. And actually on today, I just received an email that had, I don't even know, 30, 40 people on it, where they're going to have a North Carolina grassroots power mapping session. And so we're going to all meet and talk about just the road to victory in 2022. So that is happening in North Carolina.
We will get to the place of Virginia or Georgia. And I just want to say, as a closing statement, the reason that those states flipped was because people invested in Southern organizing over the long haul so that the ball could be moved forward a little bit every year. That's what it takes. And I just want to say, we're not actually a red state. If we didn't have the gerrymandering and the voter suppression that we have right now, we would look completely different politically. And it's because of systemic exclusion and suppression of the votes of people of color and foreign working people that we look the way that we do. We are going to fight that and we're going to win. So I just want to put that out there. Like, it's going to take a minute, but we're on the way, and just really appreciate y'all for understanding how important it is to support groups like ours. And remember that, you know, the South is not what it appears to be. We're fighting a liberation struggle down here, and we're going to win. So.
Well, I love it. Let's end on that note. We're going to win. We'll take it, especially, you know, as we all see the news unfold today with S1, and there may be a Supreme Court decision on the Arizona voting laws that were passed. So, you know, a lot to unpack, but you've really given us so much to be very grateful for your work, and for you guys really digging in with our fellow Americans who need to be talked to and listened to and heard. And so on behalf of Big Ten, I want to say thank you so much to Todd and to Dreama for sharing your stories and your work with us. We're truly grateful, and we're going to keep our eyes on you and keep sharing your work as we move through 2021 and into 2022, because we sure need you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming to Big Tent and for taking time out of what we hope is a nice summer day for you. And Dreama and Todd, stay well, stay safe, and thank you. Bye, everybody.